like a pretty middle class South Indian background. So I would just go to Bombay sometimes when I had breaks in between my semesters and do some castings. But that was when I got sort of acquainted, like in little doses, to how bad it was in the fashion industry. When I was starting in 2012, like all the girls who were dark skinned and just did runway, they didn't do TV commercials. And we had this influx of Brazilian girls and South African girls. We specifically had girls who were like kind of Indian looking, but not Indian looking. In India, you sort of confronted all the time in your immediate environments, you know, your aunties and your grandmoms, because you want your children to be fair skinned so that they can be considered beautiful. Casting involves much more than casting a pretty face, because the person you're casting is not a nameless, faceless person that doesn't exist outside of your campaign anymore. You're encouraged to explore who you are outside of just your job or just being a model.
With so much that's going on, how do you think we can persist and stand up for ourselves when we have to make these choices at such a time? With the popularity of social media, we get to experience it more immediately and from all sides. How did you cope with the difficulties and discrimination that you faced in the industry? Thank you, Nidhi, so much for joining us. I am excited to have this conversation with you and look forward to sharing your story. I'm going to dive right into, the deep conversation that we're going to have. My first question to you is, so the problem of colorism is one that has been rampant across cultures. And with the popularity of social media, we get to experience it more immediately and from all sides. How did you cope with the difficulties and discrimination that you faced in the industry?
I want to say that I grew up with it. So even before I joined the industry, you're fine. You can come. Sorry, that's my boyfriend. I want to say that I grew up with it though. So even before I joined the industry in India, you sort of confronted all the time in your family, in your immediate environments, you know, your aunties and your grandmoms and things like that, because there's this like narrative that that you want to be, you know, you want your children or your nieces or whatever to be fair skinned so that they can be considered beautiful, or it's some kind of sort this weird like what's the word I'm looking for, sort of prized possession. I'm not even sure why. So it's kind of like drummed into you when you start kind of blooming into like an adolescent, you know, it's like don't go out into the sun. And my mom I used to be a swimmer, so my mom would get like scolded or remarks like that, you know, my skin would get destroyed by how many hours I spend in the sun swimming and things like that. So it's just something that I just considered you as passe, really, like when you're a child, that you're pretty if you're a fair girl, or like, you know, when you're in 5th grade and you have like your school annual day and the fair girl gets cast as Snow White or whatever. I played one of the 7 dwarves. You know what I mean? And my dad was really upset. He's like, why did you play Snow White? I was like, it wasn't up to me. And then, you know, you start thinking about it as you grow older. And I feel like being confronted with the money girl or whatever, that was difficult because it meant like I didn't have source, like it like affected my source of income, really. So then I had to talk about it. So it's insidious, you know. I think in India we face it as kids. So it's just something that I had a very long time to mull and think over. So it had ripened by the time I faced it when I came into the industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we all kind of know, it's safe to say that we all know why people think that, or why, especially in India, we think that fair skin is better and all of that. But how did you, prior to, getting into the industry, how did you deal with that personally? What did you have some kind of, how did you cope with it?
Honestly, it was just really up and down. I feel like you could ask this question of any Indian girl, and like there won't really be like a solid answer, because what do? You're kind of like, it's just tradition almost. It's just something that, it's just one of those other things that you absorb as a child. It's kind of traumatizing. You don't realize it's traumatizing because as a kid, you're just so resilient, and you just move on with your life. And then you only realize how wrong so many of those narratives were after you grow up and go out into the world, and how it affects how, adults navigate in the real world. The fact that these narratives even exist. But you grow up like looking at advertisements where, you have Fair and Lovely, you have like national advertisements that, frankly, I'm just amazed that they're even like legal, where you have like a like a dark girl refusing all, like everyone refusing a dark girl all job offers, and suddenly she gets 8 shades lighter, and like she has like every job opportunity that you could possibly wish for. Or you have like like a boy's family coming to see her, and like everyone rejects her until she gets fair skin. Like, how is this playing on national TV,
Exactly.
and how is this so like run of the mill in our like social narrative? But I don't know, like you just grow up, and then now you start questioning it. So there's narratives like this in all of our social structures, not just, I mean, in India, this is one of the problems. In America, there's like a whole bunch of other issues. So it's nice to, I hate social media. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I feel like this is one of the things that it allows, and one of the reasons I like it is communication, where communities come together and they address things that they've been through, and they suddenly realize they're not alone. So there's actual conversation happening, whereas before, people felt like they were isolated in their experiences. So
yeah, I think that's the biggest bonus we have with social media, is just creating awareness and building communities where you can actually speak openly about these things. Of course, there's a lot of
yeah.
like hate that there is on social media, but that's something I guess you can't really avoid.
Yeah.
How were you ever influenced by these aunties, when they said that you were not really
Yeah, I mean, you
ideal,
have
quote
like
unquote?
you have your days where you feel really terrible, it feels, you go through these phases of like body dysmorphia. I feel like is not something that's like, it's not just people who are big or people who have like I feel like it affects all girls. It doesn't matter if you're pretty, it doesn't even matter if you're fair skinned or you fit all the bills. Like, you still have, somebody will say something that'll make you look at yourself in the mirror and make you feel like you're not enough. And it's something that I think is like all of our personal journeys. Like, we all go through feeling kind of not worthwhile for whatever reason, whatever our experiences are. And it's entirely up to you to get out and come out on the other side, which is really hard, honestly, when you're like 13 or 14 or 15 or 16. But you really like, I had a very questioning mind, because, which was very annoying, I think, to a lot of my elders. But it was always like, but why? Like, my questions were always about why, because I guess I had a sports background, and I was an athlete. So like, I think I was kind of saved from being sexualized as an adolescent, because I think that happens to girls too. Like, when you hit 13, 14, there's this kind of like sexualization that happens, where you're, in some um in some households or families, where you're like, oh, now you have your period, you have to dress differently, or you have to act differently, or you can't play with the boys anymore, whatever, you know what I mean? So I was kind of saved from that. And I was allowed to be like a kid for a little bit longer. So I wasn't really trying to see if my hair looked nice or if my skin looked nice or whatever. Like, it was still annoying to like do those kind of feminine self-care things that are imposed on girls pretty early in India. So yeah, I think I just questioned it a lot. I just had a very questioning mentality towards why that is the status quo, and how does it matter if I have freckles, or how does it matter if I have dark skin or whatever. And I think my mom protected me from it, because she is a very dark skinned lady, and she confronted more of it when she was younger. So I think she wanted to protect me and my sister, her daughters, from it. So she would constantly reinforce that our skin color was amazing and beautiful, because she's Malayali and she's from Kerala, so she's very dark as well. So
yeah.
That
Can you
helps.
tell us a little bit about, your childhood and if that ever led you to becoming a model? Like, did you always want to be a model? And also a little bit about your career and your experience so far, and how you came to be the first Indian model global ambassador for L'Oreal.
It's been a really long journey. I didn't think I would be a model, because I grew up in Bangalore, and between Bangalore and Cochin, and my mom's side of the family is Malayali, my dad's side of the family is Kannadiga, and everybody's my parents are both doctors, and my grandfather's an engineer. So it's very we're very obviously service oriented as a family, and it wasn't something that anybody was happy about my doing. I got into it accidentally. I was studying in Pune in Symbiosis, and I was in law school. And Pune is one of those places where you just have a whole bunch of kids studying a lot of other things. Like there's a lot of universities, so some of my friends are studying media studies and things like that. So I was helping a friend of mine who was working in production, like location scout in Bangalore, and I essentially ended up on, Get Gorgeous or whatever, the model hunt, and I ended up signing a contract late. It was very bizarre. And the only reason my parents, I come from a pretty middle class South Indian background, so my parents try to think that they were a little more liberal than other, parents in the same whatever. And they were like, well, you can do it in your semester vacations in between, like going to school or whatever. So I would just go to Bombay sometimes when I had breaks in between my semesters, and just, do some castings. But that was when it was very interesting, because that was when I got sort of acquainted, like in little doses, to how bad it was in the fashion industry, because I'd have to like go and go and do like these horrible auditions in the things that I've done. Like I really gone Oshiwara and Versova. I don't know if I've ever been to Bombay. Like these really terrible auditions for TV commercials, and they didn't even want me there. I don't even understand why I was sent there. But there was nothing else going on in Bombay at the time. I feel like the industry has grown too with me, like the opportunities in Bombay and the brands that exist in Bombay and the kind of casting that's happening, and also casting directors. There's just so much more going on now. Even when I just left, I left in 2016. It had grown so much, but when I was starting in 2012, like all the girls who were dark skinned and who were somewhat tall were 5'9". They just did runway. They didn't even bother with casting for TV commercials or print work, because it wasn't their market. And we had we had this influx of Brazilian girls and South African girls and things like that, which I think is great, because I think in a model market, you should have girls from all over the world or whatever. But we specifically had girls who were like kind of Indian looking, but not Indian looking. So it was like this aspirational Indian look. Like you have like fair skin and olive skin and green eyes, and it was really funny, because they didn't even know the running joke in my job is that sari catalogs were the last jobs I ever booked, because they didn't want Indian girls wearing saris. The clients from Surat, they're like, no, we can't have an Indian girl wearing our saris, because our clients won't want them. But you're like, aren't your clients Indians? Because they prefer Brazilian girls wearing saris, somehow that sold better or whatever. But no, I didn't think that I'd ever get into modeling. It was just something that happened, and it was something that was interesting to me. I was always doing creative things. When I was studying in law school, I was always making short films with FTII, which was, they were our neighbors in Pune. And when when this happened, it was just something that I thought was interesting. And also, nobody in my family had any background or experience or network, so it was just something that was my own, which I liked.
So what was the
yeah.
one job that kind of changed things for you, or changed your
The one job that changed things for me was shooting an editorial with Marie Claire. So I remember, because I'm not very tall either, and I remember I was doing I just love being on set, and I love the process of bringing a something that starts off as an idea to fruition, and being a part of that whole process. That's how I see my job. So I've been doing test shoots and I still do test shoots. Honestly, I still shoot for free with new photographers and creatives because it's just fun, honestly. And I'd been doing a lot of those, and I remember one of the photographers that I'd worked with was booked on a real editorial shoot, and the model didn't show up, and they wanted someone who was specifically 5'9" or taller, and the photographer just insisted that they book me because he knew that I was free that day and I wasn't doing anything, and the model that they had originally booked hadn't shown up, and he refused to shoot her because even if she did show up after, because he was like, well, that's really unprofessional, and we must call Nidhi. And and it was really hard for me to break into editorial work because I remember at the time, and it's also such a small clique, honestly. You don't realize how small Bombay is until you actually start working in Bombay. And at the time, I remember the stylist was just like, she's so great looking, but she's too petite, like 5'7" isn't going to work for editorial shoots and things like that. And after I shot that editorial, I just started working a lot more, and then I did the cover of Elle, and then I did the cover of Dacia and things like that. And then people weren't questioning if I could shoot editorial anymore. But it was, like breaking into commercial work was still a process, but it was nice to break into one part of it because there's like multiple parts of the business that you want to be included. You want to do runway, and you want to do editorial, and you want to do commercial, print, and video. So those are all different, completely different clients and different casting directors, and they don't really
what has the last couple of years been like for you in New York, and did something particularly lead you to L'Oreal, or was it that basically the last how many ever years you've been in the industry kind of just led up to it?
I think there's just, it's really interesting now that I think about my career in hindsight. I feel like the questions I was asking 10 years ago are questions that obviously people were asking in isolated ways in different parts of the industry, because the questions I was asking was about casting and was about representation when I started, because it was like, why is a Brazilian girl who does not know how to wear a sari clearly uncomfortable in this garment, and it's not her traditional garment, shooting a sari catalog? And why is that, why is that aspirational to that, the lower middle class Indian client, as opposed to an Indian girl that looks like them wearing this garment, and these are things that I didn't realize, it's really funny how that happens. These are things I didn't realize were being kind of asked everywhere. And my path sort of coincided with these questions. Like my career grew with in tandem with these questions being asked all over in all the markets. So I think that was this kind of like fortuitous, like the serendipitous like meeting of circumstance. I think they were looking for someone. I wasn't the only person that they were considering, but they were looking for someone that kind of fit a lot of criteria. And there were obviously interviews and meetings, and they wanted to see all the work I'd done over the years. But more specifically, they also wanted somebody who wasn't just a face and wasn't just shooting as a model, like who had other interests and who cared and things like that, and also was articulate. I think that was something that they were very keen on. so everything sort of just fell into place, and the timing was right as well for, the world in general, because I think because of social media, there's just been this rapid realization, even for brands, that people want to be people want to see themselves, first of all, which is representation in
Yeah.
on a platform. Like, they want to feel like it's relatable. They don't want to feel excluded anymore. And also, somebody that was kind of approachable too. So it just kind of all fell into place. Like, I had multiple meetings with them in Paris. I flew from New York to France, and they'd seen my work with the Invisible Girl Project, and they'd seen all the work I'd done over the years. And then they realized I was obviously, like, my profile, that I was South Indian, and I'd always talked about colorism, and I'd always questioned it within, my job. So it just kind of fell into place.
So amazing, so amazing. Congratulations, because I think it really puts us on the map in such a different way. Something that is so required, because we've been living with stereotypes for the longest of times. And I think it's time we have this representation internationally. So that's really huge. Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I don't think I realized how big it was when it happened, because for me it was like it's such a gradual growth, honestly, because obviously, like, I'm not like a Bollywood celebrity or an A-lister, so it's like there are people who know who I am because they follow the fashion circuit in India or whatever. But in general, like, for a lot of people, it's like, who's this person? And it's really interesting, because for me it's been like 10 years of like
hard work.
Yeah. So it hasn't been like overnight. Like, it's not like I moved to New York and was like, okay, like, we're signing this contract. So yeah.
So what has it been like for you? You said you moved in 2016. What has work been like for you in New York as compared to, say, Bombay?
I feel like all markets and all cities where you have this fashion industry has its own, kind of set of challenges. Like, it was challenging to come out here in 2016. Obviously, I had a contract before I came, because I had to have a work visa before I could come and work here specifically. So I was signed with Wilhelmina before I moved here. And there's a different set of challenges. The challenges were, of course, the height thing. And over here it was always like, there's a tiny little quota for anyone that's ethnic, that's not white, essentially, when you're casting. So and I don't mean that as a skin color thing. I mean it as like literally a cultural representation thing. So it's like there'd be like 60 slots open for runway or whatever, and there's like one slot open for a brown girl, not necessarily like Indian, even just like ethnically ambiguous brown looking person, things like that. And like maybe 3 casting slots open for like Asian, and even they have their own problems with casting, because it's like, you're not the same if you're Korean and Chinese and whatever, and so there are a lot of like there were a lot of cultural kind of there was a lot of cultural ignorance to combat. So there's that. And also just having to obviously live in New York and be able to have like a source of income in New York, because you need to be making money and booking work in order to live here. And I don't have like I don't have like a trust fund to like tide me over until that happens. So so there's that. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of pushing to like I think my whole career has been like pushing gatekeepers to open doors. That's it. Like, that's how, if I had to sum up all the 10 years of work that I've done, it would be just pushing gatekeepers to open doors, because there's no need to have so many strict rules. It's beauty. Beauty is and being like, for me, I see being a model, being a muse, and being a source of inspiration, and being someone who gets to be part of this like creative process. There's no need to have so many rules with regards to these kind, so many rules and structures with regards to, beauty, because it's like, body diversity is a real thing, and cultural diversity is a real thing. Like, there's no need to have such a small, narrow window for. I think my whole career has been just pushing gatekeepers open, whether it was New York, whether it was Bombay, just pushing gatekeepers to open. And I did, and honestly, that was one. My law school background helped my ability to articulate, a lot. But there was also a point where you grow up as a human being, like you're still very much a child in your 20s, like when you go into industry, which is you're already considered old when you start working in the industry in your 20s. Like, you're supposed to start at 16. So there's also the question of there's also the question of ageism in this business. That was one of the narratives that I confronted. But there's this point where you're like, you don't need to be voiceless as a talent. Like, you can ask questions of casting directors or people who are making these decisions as to why it is that they're making these so-called decisions that they're making. Like, is it just something that they're used to, or is it something, because there's always this like, but that's not what the demographic wants or whatever. Are you sure about that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was a point where I started just becoming more involved in the process, just by putting myself and my voice out there and asking questions. Like, every time I was on set, or every time I was working with a photographer, every time I was working with someone, because I think you're like seeding ideas, and it goes a long way. Like, and of course now you can seed it just on your social media platform, but before that, you have to talk to people. Yeah,
I think that's such a valuable way of dealing with this, just asking questions. And we all, in some way, I mean, there's so much discrimination, whether it's colorism, caste, religion, gender, class, even. And it feels really, really challenging and hurtful to so many of us.
Yeah.
How do you think, with so much that's going on, how do you think we can persist and stand up for ourselves when we have to, and make these choices at such a time?
I mean, it's really an individual journey, and I think that obviously I've scratched a little surface, and in so many ways I'm so much more privileged than so many other people that are dealing with so much more. It's like I've never had to deal with caste issues, for instance, like literal caste issues. I have a friend of mine who comes from scheduled caste or whatever, and some of the things that she has experienced is just horrific. Honestly, it's just so brutal and so ignorant and horrific. And her journey is entirely different from mine, and I couldn't even begin to understand what that must be like. And there has to be, for me anyway, and it was hurtful for me too. So when I was going through my process, it was really painful for me, because essentially I was combating a question of self-worth based around these ideas that were telling me that I don't have value. I don't inherently have value because I don't fit a box. And that's essentially such a personal journey, because you kind of have to decide that it's wrong. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like maybe you have to be delusionally self-confident. I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
Because like, what was I thinking? I moved to New York. Like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think the type of person that you are definitely plays a role, with just getting through a lot, for sure.
Yeah, because there has to be like a point in your life where you have this turning point where you're like, fuck what anybody else says, and fuck what the construct is. This is some bullshit. This makes no sense. And none of this has any inherent connection to how much value I can bring socially, or how creative I am, or how much I can contribute. Like, I confronted you're a model, you can't act. And it's just like, it's so random and it's so exhausting, honestly, and it has no basis in truth. And there has to be a process of like self, like you have to have these conversations with yourself, like self inquiry, and you're like, oh, you know what, like none of this matters, not really. But there's people who think that it matters, and they have no idea why they think it matters. Like, so I'm just going to ask them why, and then make them question, you know, why they have the, you know, specific way of thinking that they do. You know, it's okay.
Yeah. And I think something that you said a little while ago was, you know, reaching out, because of social media, we have this community. You know, I think just reaching out to that community and really sharing experiences goes such a long way.
Yeah, it's huge, but it's also so scary. I'm on a social media break. I haven't posted anything in 2 weeks because it's just really hard to be vulnerable too. So it takes a lot of courage. I think it takes a lot of personal courage to be vulnerable, and it takes a lot of personal courage to put your experiences out there like that, because sometimes people are just going to make fun of it, and I've seen that happen also. And then there's this whole, you know, this whole battle between how much is too much and how much is, you know, narcissistic, and how much is ego driven because you want validation, and how much is really sharing because you care, and how much is community driven. You know, there's all of these questions that come up, but I think it's okay to fuck up in the process. I think that's what's that's what's so scary, because, you know, you want to constantly, there's always this like idea of like projecting a self-image that feels like perfect, and you can't though. Like, it's just not possible. You just have to just do your best, and sometimes you fuck up, sometimes people don't understand what you're trying to do, and sometimes people will see you as doing too much, and that's okay also.
Yeah, and I think the problem with social media also is that they expect you to be perfect. I mean, people expect you to be perfect, so there's no room for errors. It's like if you say, for example, are a voice for colorism, and if you do or say something by honest mistake, something wrong, you can't literally turn back from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really difficult. That's what's so scary about social media, because when you fail on such a global platform, you can't take it back either. Like, somebody's already screenshotted something that you said and things like that. But I think it's like, I definitely think cancel culture needs to go, but there's also like I would prefer it if it changed from cancel culture to accountability culture, because I think that it's okay to make people accountable, you know, because I think people say things in ignorance, and it's okay to learn from your ignorance, and it's okay to also have lessons in accountability, because too many, I think we've gone far too long with, especially gatekeepers who don't need to take accountability for their actions, who just kind of like allow the status quo to continue when they could be making changes and things like that, just because of pure ignorance. But I don't know, it's a work in progress, you know, like, you know, you have a lot of great things coming from the outlet and the platform, and then you have all of this stuff. Like, it's, what are you gonna do?
So
you just have to take the good with the bad.
What progress have you seen ever since you've kind of been in the industry from then to now?
Well, I definitely feel like people are questioning their own you know, knowledge. Like, I've seen that happen. Like, people that would previously assume that they're in a position of some sort of influence and power, therefore what they think must be, you know, right. I've seen people constantly questioning what they know, which is great, because that's basically like, that's like a little nugget of self-inquiry. You know, you're like, am I right in thinking, because people are afraid of being canceled too. So it's really great, because they're like, well, you know, there's a realization that there's a fear. I mean, it comes from fear, so it's not that great, but it still helps. There's a fear because social media, people are, can you hear my sirens?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Because people are afraid that they're going to be canceled at every, at every opportunity. Like people are waiting to pounce on you to make a mistake so that they can cancel you. So now there's this, are we sure we have it all right? Are we sure that, we're doing the right thing? Are we sure we have the right information and the right perspective, blah, 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 blah. And I know that it's performative, like for a lot of people, it's still performative, but in that process of being performative, you're still getting an education, and because of that, I think that there's just a much better, more complex understanding of people and cultures. And I feel like on some level, we have this industry that has this real opportunity to really be this microcosm of, so complex social and cultural narratives all coming together to be like truly representative, of this global like social structure that we live in, because we're kind of all living out on the internet, and we're really connected to each other in this crazy way, where borders don't really matter,
Yeah.
and you're kind of learning, you have access to so much more information than you ever did before. And there really is kind of like this layer, especially the younger, like the Gen Next or whatever, like they're really all connected to each other in this way that like we weren't when we were growing up, or our parents weren't when they were growing up. There's like no borders and no barriers. So we really do in the fashion industry, like any of these industries, like music, fashion, and to be representative of that culture. And it won't happen unless we dig deeper and we truly educate ourselves, about our differences and where people come from, and about our ignorance and our privileges and things like that. So yeah,
there's definitely so much happening in the world, and in terms of we are progressing so much, which is exciting. There is a lot more awareness, and I hope that all of this kind of heads in the right direction.
I mean, that's one of the changes in the fashion industry. And also I've noticed that people at least they're beginning to realize that casting involves much more than casting a pretty face. Because you're not the person you're casting is not a nameless, faceless person that doesn't exist outside of your campaign anymore. Like they have multiple social media profiles where they're active and they're available to a larger audience. So you want to know who you're casting also. And that, I think that's nice. It has its pros and cons like everything else, but it's nice.
It's a nice thing to have a whole personality, like casting a whole personality rather than just aesthetic.
Yeah. I mean, the con in that is also that people are being performative in order to fit this new personality box. But I think the opportunity in that is that you get to sort of you're encouraged to explore who you are outside of just your job or just being a model, and it's nice because it adds to your entire profession. And that is, I see that as a huge pro, because it's nice to be not just a model, and it's nice to be not just anything. Whereas the narrative, like when I was growing up, was like, if you want to be successful, you have to focus on one thing and one thing only, and you're allowed to be multidimensional. And you're just like, are you sure about that? Which is great. So
this transitions me into really my next question, which is basically what are your plans for the year? Do you have exciting projects lined up for you, and what is it in different areas of work, or is it whatever you're up to?
Well, I'm actually going through huge transitions right now, so depending on when you're going to put this out, I'll either ask you to edit or not edit it. But I'm actually like leaving one management, and I'm in the process of going through like legal pushing and pulling because I want to move on. Because I've outgrown my old management agency and I'm moving to new representation. And it's really exciting to be moving to someone that's bigger and better. And there's obviously Fashion Week in September around the corner, which will be really interesting how that pans out. But I don't have anything specific because, well, you can't really have anything specific with my job. Like, you don't have a schedule for the whole year. You wish, but you're not an athlete. Like, you don't have like a season where you're like, okay, I'm playing this tournament or this whatever. So right now, basically, I'm in a period of moving from one representation to another representation. So I won't know until I actually start working with new management what my year looks like. I was really hoping that I could come back to India for a little bit, but I haven't been home in like a year and a half or so. But
yeah, I don't know. With COVID, it's a bit tricky to plan anything, I guess.
Yeah. I'm also looking at, like, I just got an agent for film, and I started casting because that's interesting too. Suddenly there's a lot more opportunity as an actor because you're finally not being cast as an Indian or being asked to like have a weird accent like when you're when you're doing lines and things like that, and you're just like a person, and it's if your personality fits the bill, which is also really interesting to see. Like, you're auditioning for the same roles that someone who is maybe white or maybe whatever is auditioning for. Like, I auditioned for something where like a healer, like a kind of like a witch or sorcerer sort of like situation, like a role, and it didn't matter if you were brown or white or like you could be any whatever. So that's cool.
That's so exciting. I mean, that gives so much hope.
Yeah, it's really great to be to have like roles where it's not like it's not race oriented. Like, you're not being cast for it because you're looking for an Indian character. You're being cast for it to see if your person. I also auditioned for really terrible, but like I also auditioned for a role where I was playing like a half vampire, half human, because obviously there's no end to how many vampire movies or shows you can have because they will forever be popular. But it was really interesting to be Indian and auditioning for like a half vampire, half human role. You know what I mean?
So fun.
It's so fun. It's fantasy and it's so fun. It's like not something I would have ever pictured us having the opportunity to even cast for like 5-6 years ago, even, because your opportunities were like limited to like, who are the Indian directors, what are they making, like so it's great.
Nice so fun. I'm looking forward to definitely watching and seeing what you do.
Yeah, it'll be a fun year. Once I finish all the legal process. And I've also been dealing with immigration because I'm doing my green card, and I was getting all of my stuff done for Cannes, which I was kind of doing alone because I have no management to help me right now.
Oh gosh.
Which was also crazy. Yeah. So yeah, you have updates soon. So
nice. Lovely. So my last question to you is about the Invisible Girl project. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, and also when you became a part of it and your experience with it?
Yeah, so I have been working with them since 2017. That's when I first met them. I was introduced to them by a producer in LA because they wanted to raise funds and use me as a face to raise funds for them. And I really, when I got acquainted with them, it was just so obvious that I had to be a part of the organization, because I'd actually started off being in the NGO sector before. Like, when I graduated from law school, I was in the NGO sector for a short while before I like transitioned into modeling full time. Of course, at the time I was just taking a year off to model, and then seeing how it goes, but the rest was history. So it was nice to get back into working an organization that operates principally out of South India. So we're headquartered in Chennai, and essentially it combats gendercide in India. It's registered here 501c3 in America, so we are able to raise funds here and send it to headquarters, but which is really nice. It helps a lot. It goes a long way to be able to raise funds in dollars, and I principally help with fundraising a lot. We might have that's one of the things on the menu actually this year, to have like an event, charity, like a gala or something, if COVID permits that, because we don't know, for fundraising. But yeah, it combats gendercide in India. We're a small organization. We have over 600 girls right now, and essentially we monitor pregnancy in some certain villages on ground. And as we get more intel, we expand, but we also need to be able to hire more employees because we only have about 6 now in Chennai. And monitor pregnancies, and also rescue girls who are abandoned by their families, because in Chennai we also work with the child welfare board, because Chennai actually has one where families come and drop off their kids when they know, families who know that there's a child welfare committee that exists, they come and drop off their kids that they don't want, literally, with them. And we work with them to help them, or we take on some of the girls. And Rexa, our lawyer in Chennai, she's also like educating the police on some of these issues, I think, like sensitizing the police. So yeah, like sort of just like all around combating gendercide. We recently had a family where we like kind of re-educated the father to accept his daughter, because like there's this traditional notion, especially in rural India, like girls are not allowed to go to school or have an education and cannot be an earning member. So like they're a financial burden, obviously, which is why female infanticide is so rampant, because they kind of have to be married off as soon as they turn a certain age, and then the daughter's family has to take over the financial burden of funding the expense of the wedding. And so essentially you're just seen as somebody that's going to drive your family into financial ruin. But recently there was a nice story of a father sending daughter to school, and re-educating that perspective in rural India, that your daughters cannot be earning and providing members of the family who can be educated and also be like, I guess, sons. I hate saying that, but so yeah, that's really what we do. We have girls who are babies to girls who are about 20, 21 now, just thinking of going into university, like college education. But yeah, just combating infanticide, which was really close to my heart, because South India, and hopefully we will help more girls, but right now it's kind of focused there.
Amazing. I think, we have definitely a long way to go with it, but I really think that, with people like you making a difference vocally on the internet and in person, and really creating awareness goes a long way, because we need more people like that to just create awareness with whatever it is. And I think that's something that's really lacking and needs to be done a lot more. So I'm really, glad that you're doing what you're doing, and it's exciting.
I'm really glad you think that. Sometimes I think I need to be a little bit quieter, because I feel like I do too much. But
no, don't be quiet. You have a lot to say, so just say it.
Yeah, but the future is definitely exciting. Hopefully, I kind of just want a place where there's just place for everyone at the table. That's it. Really.
Yeah, nice.
Like it's not lacking in abundance for anyone. Because there's always this feeling where it's like, oh, there's only place for one Indian person at this whatever fashion show or whatever, and you're just like, no, there isn't.
Yeah. Thank you, Nidhi, so much. I'm so glad we had this conversation. on a Sunday, but well worth it. I think it's definitely made my Sunday. I look forward to all that you're doing, and I'm sure that our audience will as well. So thank you for having this with us.